Hello everyone and welcome to the full beginner React course with AI projects course. I warmly welcome you to the course and thanks for enrolling guys. I'm really glad you like to learn a lot about React, learn from start about React and also improve your skills with AI projects as it's really helpful and will help you do more freelance work, really increase your skills and become more valuable work on more interesting projects. And that's what we're going to be learning in this course guys. So this course is mostly for beginners. We'll be learning the basics of React, how it works, how we can use it to build simple to even complex applications. I'll be teaching you the basic building blocks and we'll be doing a couple of projects and then you'll be able to build even complex applications using what you learned through this course. So for this course we'll be going over the basics of React first and then we'll be going over the APIs, Redux, and local storage. So these you guys, if you guys don't know what this means, that's totally fine. We'll go over this. We'll learn how to store your data permanently in the local storage, build a couple of small applications with it so you get an idea of how it all works. Then we'll build an AI resume generator application. This will be using all of the building blocks, all of the knowledge that we got from React, as well as we'll be using the OpenAI API in order to generate a resume generator. We will not be using normal methods. We'll try to do something creative and really increase your knowledge on how AI and how LLMs, all those things work. So we'll go more into depth as we learn more about React as well as OpenAI API. So these are the projects and the things, topics that you'll be learning. This will really increase the skills, increase the knowledge that you have on React, as well as give you more skills on creating AI applications. And we'll be using special like new topics like vector embeddings, which you'll be using to chat with your own documents, which will really give you a good knowledge as well. It's not very hard, it's just basic things we can, I'm sure you guys will be able to learn it very easily as well. So we'll go over that as you get more understanding about it. It'll be easier for you guys as well. So a little about React. React is built by Facebook and it's totally open source. You can see it on GitHub as I've given the link below. You can see it over there. It's maintained by the community and it has really increased in popularity. And a lot of people are actually using React for projects. And there's a lot of projects that are built on top of React called Next.js, TypeScript, Sanity, a lot of things. We'll talk about that as well, which help, which is built on top of React, but then React is a main library that helps to build a lot of projects and a lot of websites. A lot of big companies use that as well. If you want to check it out, you can check it out through the link I've provided over here. You can also build website React using React. As I said, there are some other extra frameworks built on top of React, built using React, TypeScript, Next.js, which will help you to build websites, which we'll do in this course. But it also helps you to build applications using React Native. So it's basically the same syntax as React. Once you learn React, it will be easier for you to learn React Native, TypeScript, Next.js, all of these things. It will be very easy to catch up and get started and start building projects. The main thing is to be able to understand the building blocks of how React works, and then you'll be able to do React Native everything. So as you guys can see, you can build beautiful apps. So it's the same thing as building like mobile versions of websites, but it's quite different as we need to do some native stuff for iOS, Android, a couple of changes, but then it's the same thing. And if you have good React knowledge, you'll be able to have React Native as a good knowledge. And if you have React good knowledge on React, you will have Next.js, TypeScript, all those knowledge as well. So React is a great framework to learn, and that's what we're going to be learning, guys. As I said, we'll get started with the basics and we'll go from there. And in the next video we'll start with going over the documentation, going over the React documentation, seeing how you can constantly progress on the changing stuff that is happening in the React community. Even though if there is no update, you'll be able to easily catch up on that. We'll make sure we'll go over the documentation, see what are the new updates, get started with React, install the specific packages, and get started with the basic Hello World application. And let's go from there. I hope you guys are interested, excited for the next couple of videos and the next couple of projects that we're going to be creating. Thank you guys. Please do kind of follow the code while I'm writing, so it's very easy for you to catch up at the end of the course. Thank you so much, guys. See you guys in the next video. Hey guys, and welcome to the second video. So in this video, before we get started with the code and learning how the basics work, I just want to go over the documentation, the React documentation, and show you the basic components and the basic points of React that differentiate it from from other frameworks and using HTML, JavaScript to create, website projects. So I'll go over this, and we'll also go over the setup, the steps for installation, installing a React project, and then making sure to able to run that on your laptop or PC, and then making changes to that. We'll do that in this video. So I just want to go over the React documentation. As I said, you can do web and native user interfaces, and this is one of the most important things in React, which is components, which is what differentiated from HTML and JavaScript, and using that as a combination. Basically, rather than having all of your code in one specific file, which has all of the elements, the components, everything in one specific file, all of your functions, state management, everything in one file, you can basically segregate each specific or common components that are used in a specific file in different in one file to different files, and then you can use that in multiple different files. So basically, if you see this good example, this is a video component. Normally in HTML you would do the thumbnail, full thumbnail component code, then the like button full component code, then you would copy paste it for each application. But here what you can do is you can create a component called thumbnail and pass the video as a parameter to this. If you don't know what that means, we'll go over that when we do it in the actual code. We can use and pass that as a parameter to the thumbnail, and also create a like button component, which is separate from this component. It's a separate other component which we can use to do some other code, other functions, other if conditions, everything. So this is totally separate from this component, and then you can basically put that all together in one specific component. So if you see, if I highlight over this, it shows it's this specific part. If I highlight over the A tag, it's this. If I highlight over the H3 and the like button, it's totally different components. So this helps us to create more in-depth and comprehensive components rather than having like the complexity of it. It's very easy to do complex stuff, as you can easily put that into specific components, specific files, and do complex functions, all of those things in separate files rather than in one file. It also has more benefits than that, which is state management and being able to do re-rendering, and that's a lot of it. We'll go over that in the next couple of videos. This is the basic things. If you go down, you can also see there is some uh, markup that they have put for each specific component here. Based on some if conditions, you can change the heading, and then you can map that out and put that to a specific component. We'll learn more about this once we actually start coding, which will help you to understand it more easily. And this is basically like the syntax. As you can see, it's mostly similar as how HTML is. This is a function, and this is use state. Basically, this is what's different. It's called hooks, and here it's components, the main thing of React, which is components. And then here, as you normally would, you pass parameters which are dynamic over here compared to how it is normally in HTML or JavaScript. So that is the main gist of how React.js works, and we'll get started with installing React and setting up React project. So before that, in order to set it up, you need to go to nodejs.org, and this is where this is open source, and it's like a runtime environment which helps you install multiple packages and run lots of frameworks and libraries, all those things. So you need to have node.js installed. So 20 version 20 is the latest. I have 20 as well, but for some projects I use 18 or 16, but those are for all projects. So if you're doing it right now, you have to use version 20, but based on what time you're looking at the video, the version might be different. So make sure you download the latest one. So click on download and install that. As you can see, Node.js can be used for multiple different applications, creating backend applications, front end, streaming applications, multiple stuff. Once you have Node.js installed, go over to, so the link will be nodejs.org. It will be in the description. Once that's done, you can go to create React app. So basically, if you need to create a React application, there is a couple of files, a couple of standard files, templatized files that you need to have in React in order to run a React application, which is package.json. For example, package.json, which contains all of the packages that it will be using. which, and then you have css files, then you have javascript files, then you have files that have the compiled version of the components. So all of those things, once you see like the actual component, it will be quite easy for you to understand. But rather than doing that for every single component, using create react app, you can basically let me click on get started. So if you say npx create react app and give the name of your app, it will automatically create like a standard React application with all of the necessary files and packages. It will install it for you. As you can see, it's installing React, React DOM, React scripts, all of those things, and it will create a React project for you. And you can just basically say npm start, which is a command to start your application, and then your app will be live. You can start changing files and go on with your project, rather than you creating each file by yourself. So we'll be using create react tab, and this is what a lot of people are using. So I'll give a link to this as well in the description. To install it, you need to give npm install dash g, which is globally, rather than you having like this package locally for a specific project. You can globally install in your pc or laptop. So if you want to have uh, multiple instances of this, if you have another project that you want to create, you can easily do create react app and then put the name of your app, and then it will automatically generate the react app. So how you can do this is open up your terminal, and then let me check what node version I have. So if the way you check the version of node you have is node dash v. So I have 14. I'm using something called nvm in order to change the version of node that I use. If you want, you can install nvm as well. I'll leave a link to that in the description. So now I'm using node v20, which is the latest version. And once that's done, as you can see over here, I'll copy this npm install dash g and just paste it over here. This will install create react app, and you'll be able to run create react app and get your what is it get your react project up and running. So let's see how you can get your react project up and running. So one thing you need to do is the commands are different. You need to say npx create react app. That makes sure you have all of the latest files rather than using npm. Npx makes sure that you have all of the latest files react based on react updates. So I'll say npx, I'll copy this and paste it, npx create react app my app. So this is the name of the app. So I'll say uh, uh, yeah, basics dash 01. Once I click on enter, it will start installing the react project, creating the react project, installing specific standard packages, which is react dom, which is important, same as react. I mean, it's important for react to run in the same version. Then it's react scripts and CRA templates. There are multiple packages which get installed as well, which is being installed. Once this is done, it will automatically create the react app in a specific destination. For me, it's Sanjay Raj slash React Basics. And then once that's done, I'll get back with you guys, and it might take some time, but I'll will get back once it's done. Okay, guys. So as you guys can see, the project has been installed. It took around 47 seconds. It has created the necessary basic packages, created a Git repository, which will go into when we are creating the projects. We don't need it right now. And it added a couple of more projects, took some more time, removed the project, and then did some validation. And then it has given us the commands for using this project. So we don't need any of this. We can basically go into the project folder that is created, which is React Basic 01. So the way you go into a folder is put cd and React Basics dash 01. Now we're inside that, and we'll simply say npm start. That will basically run the project for us. So this makes it very very simple, rather than us needing to have create all of the files packages by ourselves. You can easily use create react app. It will install all of the packages for you, and then you can get started and change the code. Let's also take a look at the code. I'll also cut this and I'll say code dot. That will open the code in Visual Studio Code. So as you can see, it's over here. I will just go over the basic structure of the code. So over here, as I said, you can see it's so we have, first of all, we have node modules, which is basically a folder containing all of the packages that we have installed, which is the basic and which is necessary for our React project. Then we have the public folder, which is like the client facing folder, which has all of the assets that we want to use, which are images, videos, gifs, all of those things. And then we also have an index.html, which is quite important. I'll get to this once we go over the JavaScript files. So that is a public folder. It's a client facing side which contains all the assets and the HTML file. And we have the source, which is where all of the code goes in. And here you can see app.css, app.js, index.css, index.js, logo, report, web vitals, setup test, all those things. So there are some unnecessary files. We'll do some cleanup and then only use the necessary files. The important part is index.js and app.js. So index.js contains imports React. So this is like the basic syntax. You import React, and then we are importing React DOM as we saw in the terminal. Create React app, installed React DOM. Then we're also importing index.css, and then here, as you can see, we are importing a component. This is not like a set of code in this specific file. We're importing a component, so we're importing it from that specific file called app.js. So importing that, importing a function called report web vitals, which is not going to be necessary for us. Let's just leave that. And here we are creating a variable called root, and that is react dom dot create root, and we're getting the element called root. It has id of root, and then we are rendering the app, which is the component that we imported inside of the root. So what is basically happening is that we're creating an element called root, which is going to be created in the index.html file that I showed you guys. Over here, as you can see, there is a div called with an id of root, and then we're taking that element in index.css and injecting the app component inside of that root. So that's basically how we get access from like the React code that we do. We compile that into index.html code. So that's how that is happening, and it's quite important if you know it. And then let's go ahead and look at the app.js. If you click on app.js, so this is the basic boilerplate code structure format of how React is used. You basically import all of the things that you want. Here it's logo.svg as well as the app.css that you're using, and then it's a function. It's an app function. You can call it an app component, and then it returns some JSX. So that's completely a little bit different from how HTML code is written, but it's the same. As you can see, div, header, image, p tag, a tag, all those things. But as you can see, the class name, it's quite different, and the way you put the arguments is different. So that's the only thing that's different. Let's say we have a different component. Let's say it's called card or dialogue or model. You can basically import that model. How you do it, let's say there's already a file called model, right? And we have done code in order to get a pop-up in our website. We import the pop-up from dot slash pop-up. That will be over here. Let's say already it's already there, and they'll come over here and render the pop-up component, and that's basically it. It'll make it very easier for us to create new components, add that, change it. Let's say we want to pass a variable. We want the name to be different for each and every page, and this is going to be for the home page or payment page, and the pop-up will be totally different for each specific page, rather than us being needing to copy and paste the pop-up code in all of the pages. So that will make it very easier for us. So this is the basic structure of the React component, guys. As you can see, node modules contains all of the folders with the packages installed, so it's highly necessary. Public is the client facing side. It has all of the assets as well as the index.html file. Source contains all of the React and all of the code, logic, CSS, all of those important things. We'll do some cleanup in order to get only the necessary stuff. Then we have git ignore, which is, the node modules is around 100 megabytes. We don't need to upload the node module to GitHub, which will take a lot of time and resources. So we'll avoid things like node module. So inside .ignore, if you put any file, that will be ignored when you're uploading it to GitHub. Then we have package.json, which involves, which has the scripts that we want to run in order to start a React application. Then it also has the dependencies, basically the projects that we have created that this project is dependent on. And then we have the basic README, which is which basically explains about this project on GitHub if you're using it. And that's pretty much it, guys. This is the basic structure of how React is done. It's really basic, and we'll be able to learn more about components, state management, all of those things as we move forward in the next video. In the next video, we'll get started with the basics. I hope you guys have installed React, created a project, and also gone over the structure of it right now. Next, we'll go over useState hooks. It's called hooks. We'll go over hooks, creating custom components, as well as going over some small to-do projects, so that you guys get a hold of how these things work, and you guys can create like a project for yourself and learn how this works. So thank you guys, and I hope you guys have done this installation, and let's get started. Let's continue in the next video. Thanks. Hello guys, and welcome to the third video. And in this video, in the last video, as we did all of the installation, going through the documents, going over the project, installing everything in Node.js. I hope you guys have all done that and gone through the project setup, as well as a little bit on the React documentation. That will be helpful as we further go into the video. So as we have done the basic setup of the React project, we'll do a basic cleanup. As I told in the previous video, we'll clean up the source folder, make sure it only has the essential stuff that we need, and we'll go over the basics, the real fundamentals of React.js that will be really useful, even though we build a small project or a bigger project. So we'll go into that as well in this video. And we'll also build a small to-do project combining all of the fundamentals, so that will help you to understand more of how things work, how components work, how hooks, all of those things work. So let's start with doing the cleanup for this React project. So first, what we need to do is we can delete all of the CSS and the test files and the vitals file. So I'll just click on this, hold shift, and I'll select. So I'll hold, I think I should hold control command. Select this. We don't need index.ts, we don't need this, we don't need app.cs. Right click and I'll delete them. Move to trash. We don't need all of those files, although we are importing it. We can remove them. Yeah, remove them. We can remove the web vitals. Can remove that. So the index.js is now cleaned up. We have the React DOM, and we are also importing the app component, and we are rendering it. And let's now go to the app component. Let's, okay guys, so as we have done the cleanup for the index.js file, we'll do the cleanup for the app.js. So we don't need the logo, we don't need to import that. And I'll totally remove the header section over here. I'll remove that. So we simply have a div, and I'll create a next one saying um, React course 1. And let me also run this. So the way you run is you basically go to terminal, click on new terminal, or you can click on control, and then and you can basically click on terminal and click on new terminal, or specifically you can follow these commands, and you can say npm start, which will start up the project on a local host server. So let me open that up. So it says cannot resolve app.css in source. So let's see where it's okay. We are importing app.css. It's not there. So let's remove that. And as you can see, it says React course 01. So you have successfully cleaned up the React project, and you have now your own code and own text that is on this website. You can highly customize it, and we can do more right now. So let's go over the fundamental things that you need for a React project, and some basic stuff that you need to know. So first of all, before we do worry about the UI stuff, let me quickly create some styling. So I'll create app.css over here. So all of this stuff should be done inside of this source folder, which contains all the JavaScript, CSS, and all the function code. So I'll do app.css, and for the body, I'll create I'll give it a width of 600 pixels, and margin auto, which will basically center all of these content in the center. Center all of them. And for the body, that's that. Let me refresh and see. Okay, I should import it. So let me import that in the index.js file. I'll import app.css, and as you guys can see, it's centered in the middle, and also I'll put some margin for the y-axis. I'll give around 40 pixels. I'll give some y margin, and I think should give it a little bit more. Okay, as you guys can see, it's a little bit from the top. It has come down and it's centered. So now we can add more content and easily not worry about styling, go over with the just simply learning the functionality. So I'll basically assume that we are going to be building like a to-do application in order to learn all of the fundamental stuff. Even though it's a e-commerce application or complex application or a to-do application, the functionality is just the same. You need to create elements, then you need to read them, you need to update it, and then delete it. These are the main functionalities that is important, whether it's a e-commerce app or a to-do app. So we'll start with a to-do app and then go from there. So I'll create a new div, create a checkbox, and then I'll create a p tag, which will be, let's say, breakfast, so which is going to be the first task. And I'll give this a class name of task, and for this specific task we're going to be display flex and align item set. So this is just like basic css in order to get like stuff to look good and make sure that we'll be able to move forward without worrying about the ui. So this is the task which has the checkbox input, as well as the p tag which has the name of the task that we want to do. So right now we have it hard coded in React, but normally we would have different tasks that we want to add depending on the day, depending on the time, depending on what are the tasks that we get in hand. So for that, we need to have an input box which takes in the user's input and then adds it to some sort of an array or some sort of a list which contains all of the tasks. And then we need to be able to loop over them, go over each of the tasks available, and then list it out over here. So first, let's start off by creating an input, and then we'll give so these are basic html elements. I'm sure you guys are familiar with it. So we'll go to placeholder, enter your new task here. As you guys can see, the input is over here. Give it a class name of input and make the width 100%. Okay, enter a new task over here. And how do we store the value that the user is typing inside? Normally in html you would get document dot, you will get the element and then the value inside of it, but in react you don't do that. So you can use something called useState, which will manage all of the state that you're handling inside of a react component or react file. So I'll get started with doing the useState, and I'll explain to you guys how each of it works. So I'll create const like you do in javascript, and then I'll open up an array and I'll give a name to the variable, and I'll say uh, the task that the user is inputting. And then the second one inside the array is going to be the function that updates this value. So I'll say set task. So we'll call the set task function in order to update the task value inside task value. And that will be use equals to use state. As you type it, it will autocomplete. It will be imported from react. It will import react, and then that's a function, and initially it's going to be an empty string. So this is a format how useState is like function formatted. So it's a useState function. The default is an empty string, and then it gives you an object, an array. The first element in the array is the actual value, which is initially just an empty string. And then we have a function which is set task, which you call in order to update this task, update the string. So as you might have already guessed, we can set this task variable to, so inside the input we open up value, and that is going to be equals to task. So initially it's going to be equals to an empty string. So this is going to be the default value that you're setting. If you want, say, take breakfast as the default value, you can type that in and it will automatically be updated in the input. So that will be that. I'll save. So as a user changes their input, it needs to automatically update the state that we're handling. So that will be on change. Use on change function. So this uh, in this function you will get the text that the user is actually typing. So I'll say text, and that will be an arrow function, and I'll call it set task function. As I said, that will change change the uh, basically the variable, the use state variable. So it's not going to be the text, it's going to be the element that we're going to get. So we're going to be getting the entire input element just as we do in HTML and JavaScript. So we'll say e dot target dot value, which is going to contain the value that the user is constantly changing. And this is basically going to, let's say, so what have we built? Let's just try to recap. So the value is going to be the task, which is this variable, which is going to be initially an empty string. As you see over, it's an empty string, and as the user changes we get the element which is going to be input element, and we set the task which is going to be the state variable. We are updating the state variable using this set task function, and we are calling the set task function and passing e dot target dot value, which is going to be the value that the user is typing in the input. And let's go ahead and see how that is working. So there's no real way how we can check how the the input is changing. So let's basically open up a p tag, and I'll open up parentheses. So basically this is how you render variables in React. So compared to HTML and JavaScript, where you specifically take that element and update it in JavaScript, you can basically open up this parenthesis, you open up this curly brackets, and then pass in the variable name, and that will basically have the variable content inside of that, the state content. This doesn't need to be a string, it can be an array, an object. So we need to properly map that and render it in the right way. So as you can see, I put the variable task so we can see the uh, changes being done. So I'll say take breakfast. As you guys can see, as I type in the input, it's being updated, automatically updated. So right now it's automatically being updated, and we have track of the user's text in a specific variable, and we're using use state hooks. So this is the first things that you guys are learning. It's called hooks. Okay, the comment hooks. So the first one is use state, and there's more hooks depending on your use case. There's multiple use state, use effect, and there's much more if you go over the React documentation, which we'll go in over in the next video and learn more about hooks. So we have done this. We have cleaned up the folder. We have created the index app.css just to make sure that we don't need to take care of the CSS separately. Then we have created a list, a static list of tasks. Then we have created an input which does state management, takes the task and updates the task based on the user's input. So right now we have hold of the user's input. In the next video, what we'll do is, based on the user input, we'll create an array which has a list of all the tasks that the user has. And then as a user clicks on enter, once he types on a task and clicks on enter, it automatically pushes the task to the array. And then we use that array to list out the list of tasks that the user has created. So let's say I say go to school and click on enter. They'll automatically create a new task like this. That'll be go to school, and I'll be also be able to update the state of the whether it's checked or not, whether the to do is updated or not. We'll do that in the next video. Hope you guys did this. Please do try to go over the documentation of React hooks. Search for React hooks and just try to go over it. So in the next video, you'll get some understanding of how React hooks works, and it'll be very easier for you. So that's this video, guys. I'll see you in the next video. Great, guys. So now that we have set up the project so that we'll be able to input the new task that we want to create, and we are storing it in the use state hooks. I hope you guys also went through the React hooks documentation so that you guys get an idea of what hooks are, what are the other type of hooks compared to use state. There are use effect and lots of hooks. But it's okay if you didn't. We'll be going over each and every hook that's necessary for us to build this project and the next upcoming projects. And in this specific video, what we'll be doing is we'll be adding the functionality to be able to, type in a task and then click on a button, and then that should add the task to the list of tasks, and we should be able to update the task whether we have done the task or not. That is going to be the functionality we are going to be doing. Now, if you guys have already done this using HTML and JavaScript, then this will be straightforward. But then if we are doing it with React, it's quite different, using useState, useEffect, and pushing it to lists and mapping it out. And so there is some specific things if you are not used to uh, the React way of doing it. So we're just trying to get like the handle of how we do stuff differently in React compared to JavaScript. If you're thinking we're doing the same thing that we do in JavaScript, this will help you further on when we're doing next projects. You'll just simply be able to do like uh, complex components very easily. So this is a fundamental that will really help you to do that. So let's get started. First of all, let's add a button. So let's just list out the things we need to do. First of all, let's add a button. So add a button to add the task, and then we need to add the task to an array which contains the list of tasks. So add the task to a array of tasks. So each task, so the array of tasks, the task, it will be an array of objects. So the object will have a done property, whether it's done or not, and then it will also have the text of the task. So it's a task text. Once that's done, we'll also be able to update the done property of the task, making sure that maybe we have done the task, we want to make sure it's checked. If we are not, then make sure it's unchecked. So let's go ahead and put this input into a div, and let's add a button over here. Let's say add task, and over here I'll say input container, and I'll just add some basic styling quickly. Display flex in align item center. So over here it says add task, and over here I will give a on click property so that once this is clicked, we'll be able to handle the next functionalities. So on click, so as you guys can see, this is not on click like it would be in HTML, or we wouldn't need to do window dot element dot get attribute or something like that. We'll just say on click, and then that will be an arrow function. We'll get the event property. If we want, event will be the element property of this element. We'll get the button element itself in the arrow function, and then we'll say handle at task, and that is a function that we'll call. So we don't have that function yet, we'll do that. So I'll create that function over here. So this is where we create all of the functions and we return the content, which is called JSX, as we talked about in the first video. It is the same as HTML, but it's quite different. As you guys can see, the naming conventions are different. The way we map out things and list them will be different. As we take a look at when we're listing out the tasks, that will be different. So we'll add the create the function as a const handle at task. That will be a function, and as we already have the text of the task over here, I will create a new array which will store all of the list of tasks. So I'll create a new use state that will be tasks, and this is going to be the function that will change, that will update that list of tasks. So that will be set tasks, and that will be use state, and that will be an empty array. So as you guys know in the previous video, this will be the default of this state, and this will be the variable name of the state, and this will be the function which will help you to change the value which inside the state variable. So over here, how we will change an array is like set, we'll put set tasks, call the function. It's the same as updating the set task over here, set tasks. So we'll put an array. So the way it's going to be different here is we want the tasks array to already have the previous task that were there, and we just simply want to append it. If it was in JavaScript, we could simply say dot append, but this is not like a JavaScript constant variable. It's a state, it's a hook. So how we do it is open up the array and do the spread operator, which is basically to populate the existing content inside of an array or an object or a string. In this case, we want to populate the existing content inside of an array. So we'll say dot 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 tasks. That will automatically populate the, let's say there are 5 tasks. That will automatically put the 5 tasks over here, and then we can put in the new task. So the new task is going to be, we'll have a done property which we use to track whether the task is done or not. Initially it's going to be false, and then it's going to be the task text, which is going to be the task itself. This is a name of the task that we put in through the input, so we have access to that. We'll put it over here. So right now, once we click on the button, it calls a function, then we set the tasks, and we spread the existing tasks, and then we create an object with the new task. So right now we have added the task as an array to the tasks as well. That is done. We should update the done property to the task. So what we'll do before we do the update is we need to check if the tasks are actually being added. So let's do that. So how do we do it? First of all, we need to map out the list of tasks that we're creating, and then we need to show that in the UI. So the way we do it is the tasks variable consists of the objects of the tasks. So we'll say tasks dot map. You guys would already know this through JavaScript dot map, and inside of this function we will get each task. So once we do dot map, we'll get each task, which is going to be each object or each string, depending on what content you have inside. It will be the zeroth element, the first element, second element. That is the one that is going to be returned over here in this arrow function, and we will return it. And what should we return? We should basically return this task. So over here, with the checkbox and the name, this is exactly what we should return for each task available in that array. So I'll copy that and paste it over here, and that will be a checkbox, and we'll replace this name with, as I already told you in the previous video, this is how we add variables in React. We just open a curly brackets and then put in the variable name. So each task is going to be the object name of each task, and that will be task name, and whether it's done or not. That is a property we are adding over here. Initially done is false, but as we click on it, unclick on it, click on it again, the value is going to be changing. So I'll say on change. No, I'll just put the variable right now. We won't handle the on change right now. We'll just put a variable. Just see if it works. So value is going to be each task dot done. So the done property will be false or true. So that is the one which is going to be added over here. Okay. So it should be checked. So I'll do check. So initially, as you guys can see, I've saved it. So what are we doing here? Let's just do a recap. So first of all, we added a button which handles the task. Once the user types in, let's say, go to school and clicks on add task, it'll run this function called handle add task, and it'll uh, add the task, which is going to be an object with done false, and the task text equals to the task that the user put in this input, and he's going to push it to the array of tasks. And then once we push it to the array, we're going to map out that array, basically list out each objects from that array, and we're going to get each object, and then we're going to return a specific code or function. You could also do if conditions over here, but we're just to make it simple and understandable, we're just going to map it, get each task, and then return this div. And inside this div, we get access to each task, which is going to be each object or each content inside of that array. And we're gonna put the task name inside of the p tag, and then whether it's done or not in the input, which is going to be the text checkbox. So let's see, it should work right now. Let's say I go to school and I say add task. Okay, we have a new task, but we don't have the variable name yet. So let's say task text. Okay, task. Okay, as you guys can see, we have been able to debug as we go, so you guys also understand if you guys get any error, this is how you guys should just debug. So task text is how we are adding it, but then task name is how I'm accessing it in the UI. So let's see right now. So okay, go to school is also there. Let's say take breakfast, add task, that is also added. Let's say go to movie, that is also being added. Study, okay, that is also being added. So so as you guys can see, as I add in the task and click on add task, it's being listed out. It's quite simple. But once I click on the checkbox, it should basically update the checkbox and say that this specific task is, let's say done or not done. It should update it. So how do we do that? So let's do that right now. We should first of all handle an on click or on change over here, on change over here for the checkbox. So for each task, we're putting an on change handler. So once it's clicked, we get to handle the event and then basically change the variables or function, everything. That's going to be an arrow function. As we discussed, you guys have probably done this a lot of times right now. So on change function, it's an arrow function. If you want, you can get the event, but we don't need it right now. And we're going to call handle update task. This is not yet here, so we'll create it over here. Const handle update task. That's going to be an arrow function. So what do we need to do here is that we need to basically map out the text. So basically we need to find this specific task that the user is clicking on and then update that, and then find if that to do or task is available in the array and update that as well. So let's see how we do that. Over here we need to be able to access like what task the user is clicking on. So over here I will pass in the arguments each task, the entire object, so we can basically map it out through let's say an id. But sometimes, okay, not an id. So let's say we need to have like a unique identifier for each task. Sorry guys, I'm trying to rumble, but I'm trying to try to make sure you guys can understand how we can uniquely identify each task. So first of all, what we need to do is make sure that we can uniquely identify each task so that we can update them properly, rather than, let's say if I click on this, I should not be able to update this. So that's what we're trying to do. So first of all, we need to create an id for each. We can use properties like uh, uuid, which will help you to generate new ids every time. But what we'll do right now is just simply get the index, which is going to be the second property of the map function. So let's say we are mapping the list of tasks. The first one is going to be each of the content that is inside of the array. Second one is going to be the index of the objects. So let's say I click on this, that's going to return one, because that's at the index one, because it counts 0, 1, 2, and 3. So we can use the index. So let me pass in the index to the update task, and I'll accept the index as it's been passed by the UI. And first of all, I need to the filter out the to do that I am trying to update. So I'll say task to update, and I'm going to get the list of the array that I want to update tasks. I'm going to say dot filter. So this is basically going to filter the array based on any condition that I pass. And I will get, as you guys know, the each task in filter as well. I will also get the index. So it's the same as map, but map will create a new uh, will create a new array, but then filter would not create a new array. It will just create a new array with the updated variables. Let's say I pass in a query saying I want the index where the index is only one. So that will only return a new array with the index is one. So it will create a new array, but then map, it won't create a new array. It will basically only map out each task in that. Okay, let's filter where the task index uh, task index is equals to this index. Okay, just a minute guys. Okay guys, so let's continue. Okay, so dot filter. Okay, so this is also one of the ways that we can do it, but there's also a different way that we can basically update a specific element in the array. So what we can do is we can say new tasks, and we can map out the list of tasks as we do here. We are getting each task. We're also getting the task index, and then we are putting in curly brackets. So this specifically means that we don't want to return anything yet unless we specifically actually return. So we can actually see here this brackets basically means just straightforward, just return what's inside. But here we are saying we want some logic inside before we actually return it. So let's put a if condition here. So we want to check if the task index, which is going to be a list of tasks, and that index, if that is equals to the index that we want to update. So we are trying to match here. So we have a list of tasks, and then we are passing in a specific id. So we are checking if that id is equals to this specific task. Then we want to return the done property to be equals to true, and then the name of the task text, to be simply equals to the each task dot task text. So we want to simply update the element, but just update the done part of it, done true. The task text will just remain the same. But if it's not the index, if it's not the task that we want to update, we just simply want to return the each task. Okay, I'm sure this is quite confusing, guys, but let's just see the result, and I'll try to explain more in depth about what's actually going on. Okay. Okay, else should return each task. So this is going to be filtered out with the done property to be equals to true for the actual task that we want to update. Set the tasks array with the new tasks, and let's see if it does work. Click on yes, and yeah, as you guys can see, it's working. But then if I click on it again, it's not working. Why? Because I have explicitly put it for the done to be true. So even if I click on it 100 times, it will basically only put done true. So what I want to do is I want to put it to the opposite value of the existing property. So let's say currently it's true. I want to put it to the opposite value of that. I want it to be false. So what I'll do is I'll take each task dot whatever done property it is, whether it's true or false, then the opposite of it. This basically says the opposite of whether it's true or false. So opposite of that boolean value. Let's check it now. So right now, as you guys can see, it's working. If I click on yes, I've done it, it changes that. If I click on it again, it changes that as well. Okay, let's see what is actually happening. So over here, as you guys know, as you guys might have already done, I'm mapping out the tasks, and I have an input type of checkbox, and that has the check property to be each task dot done. And then once I change it, I'm running a function called handle update task, and I'm passing the index of the task. Basically, this, let me show you guys. So just right next to this, I'll add the index. So as you guys can see, this is the text and this is the index. So this has the index of 0, this has the index of 1, this is 2, and this is 3. If I click on the first one, let's say I want to update the second one, let's say the first element. If I click on this, what the function is going to be able to do is pass this index to the handle update task function, and that will get the index, and we are mapping out the tasks array, basically this entire array, and seeing if there is any task that matches with this specific index, which is this if condition. If it does match, then we are returning the done property to be the opposite of the existing value. So let's say right now it's not done. If I click on it, it basically matches the id, the task, and then changes the done value to be the opposite. And then we basically add the task text, which we not no need which we have no need to change. If it's not equals to that index, so if it's not the first element, if I did not click on this, basically it's the true for all other three. If I did not click on this, basically it returns each task. So basically we are changing the array based on certain conditions. So this will be very useful, guys. Next couple of other projects will be using the same structure but quite a little bit differently. But this type of conditional mapping and then returning the values, changing arrays, will be really useful for us to do a couple of other projects. This will be just like a thing that we do for all functions. So it's important that we try to understand this. So this new tasks will have the tasks array. So it will have the same format of the tasks like this. It will have an array, done, false, task, test, but only the property that matches the if condition, the done property would have changed, and we have a new tasks array, and that then we will set the tasks array to the new tasks. So this will be an array of the same format. So as you guys can see, it works. We can click on it and update the task. So right now you guys have like the basic functionality, core fundamentals of React done. You guys know how you should use state in order to update the state of any text. It's the same with text, and it's the same with anything else that you guys do, whether it's a counter, whether it's a list of user data, whether it's a table of data. It's the same thing. You guys need to store it in a state and then list out the list that you have in the state, render it. You need to handle on change, and then you need to change the array and then set it up. But there's also one thing that you need to know. Let's say there's a couple of hooks that help you to do certain functionalities in a user app. Let's say you're in an e-commerce application, and every time the user refreshes, you don't need to have the user to sign in, right? So every time the user refreshes, you need to be able to store that information, the user data, the user's token, the user's ID, name, email, all those things. So that is something called that we can achieve through a couple of things. One is local storage. Basically, it's in we can always get access to that. So as you guys saw, I click on right click and inspect. Once that's there, you can go to application, and you guys can see over here local host, and this is where you can store the user data, the user ID, and then you can access it through an application and make sure you retain the user information rather than refreshing it. But then there's also different ways like context redux, which we'll go over in the next video more in depth, more slowly, and more in detail comprehensively. So right now I want to show you a hook called useEffect, which will basically help you to run a specific function every time the user refreshes the website or changes routes, anything like that. So this is one of the hooks that's used in like a lot of applications. We use in a lot of applications in our project, companies, startups, everything. So a lot of people use this hook. So this is a widely used hook. It's important that you know it. So this basically helps you to run a function or specific logic every time the user reloads the website. It's called use effect. You basically add it as the end before the return statement. It's use effect, then that is a function. You get some arguments in it, and then that's an arrow function. You put that, but there's a specific thing that you need to do right before this curly brackets over here. Right before this curly brackets, you add a comma, and then you put an array. What this basically does is that it says initially you want to run any function that is inside of this arrow function only one time when the user refreshes the website, only once. So that's what this empty array says. But let's say we want to you know up run this function that is going to be inside this arrow function every time the tasks array changes, or every time the user types in something different. So we can basically add that inside of these tasks, inside of this array, which is called dependencies. Let's say every time a user adds a new task, I want to run this specific code. Let's just try to do that. So use effect, that's an arrow function, and I'll say the dependency is tasks. So basically every time the tasks change, I want to run this function. So I'll say every time the user adds a new task, I'll say congrats, and I'll say this. I'll give an alert. So every time the user adds a new task, there's an alert. Okay, let's see. I'll add go to school. At task, it says congrats, and it has added it. Let's say I want to update it. That will also update the tasks array. So as you guys see, not only add, but then any changes to that array will fire that use effect. As you guys can see, this is what you guys can do. Maybe you guys can creatively try to do something different. Maybe once the user does a new task, maybe you can update something in the UI, or store it in the local storage. You guys can do some research on that. But that is what you guys can do through this use. So this is basically used by a lot of companies. It's mostly used in like components, pages, route changes, all those things, which will go in depth when we're building the resume generator project as well as the chat with documents project. Will go much in depth, but this is just to get like the idea of use effect, hooks, all of this into your mind, so that it'll be able to it'll be easier for you to digest it, understand it when we are moving forward. So that's what we did here, guys. What we did here in this video is basically we were able to add the task, and we were able to map add the task to a list, to an array of lists which contains the tasks, and then we will map it out and show it in the UI like this over here. And then we were also able to update the value of the to do. And then also we did the use effect hook, which basically runs every time a certain event is being done. Right now we are checking for whenever the tasks array changes, and then we say congrats. So that is what we have. You guys right now know most of the fundamentals of React. You'll be able to do a lot of projects on your own, but we'll go more in depth on things like APIs, context, Redux, local storage, helping you build more production ready applications using React and more complex stuff. That is what we're going to be doing, guys. Hope you guys like this specific video. But what I would say is you guys go over a little bit over the React documentation on hooks. Learn a little bit about some extra hooks there are some new hooks that were released, so I urge you to go read that and do some research on that. And also, guys, try to change up the UI, add up something. So add some extra variables to the task. Let's say if you want to update a task for you guys would be right now, once you're on this video, would be to update this specific text. See what you guys can do with it. I should be able to click on a button to update this specific text of this task, and that should update the list of arrays as well. So I'll not say too much. You guys can try that out. That will be kind of like a task for you guys. It will be really helpful for you guys to get your understanding on hooks and how the fundamentals work. So that is it, guys. This was quite a big video, but I hope you did find a lot of things useful. And let's see in the next video where we'll be going more in depth into APIs, Redux, and local storage. See you in the next video. Hey guys, and welcome back. Before we move on to APIs, Redux, local storage, all of the advanced stuff, I wanted to show you guys how we can work with components, how we can add code as components and uh, use them in React files. So as you can see, this component, this file is called app. This function is an app function. This is basically, you can think of it as a home page, but then right now we have all of the code to handle tasks over here. As you can see, it's quite cluttered. We have the state of handling tasks, then we handle add task, and then handle update task, and then the use effect. Then we are mapping all of the tasks and adding each task as a div. This is basically one of the parts that of the specific page. As we add more functionality, the page is going to get much bigger, and we won't be able to handle our code properly. Therefore the accuracy of the code, all of that will really go down. So what we can do is make sure that this content, this div, all of this task related stuff goes into its own specific component. So I'm on the source folder. I'm creating a new folder called components, and I create a new file called tasks.jsx. So this is a type of React files, JSX. So I'll create task.jsx, and I'm going to import React from React. So this is the basic template of doing React components. Uh, Here it's not imported because it's app.js. If it's app, you can import it if you want to. If you don't, you don't need to. I'll just import it just for practice. You guys can know it. I'll also copy this import. We're importing useEffect and useState. So inside of tasks, we want to call the new function to be, let's say, tasks, and that will be the new function name. And we should return the tasks content over here, which will include the input as well as the list of tasks. So I'll cut that and paste it over here. But you guys, as you guys can see, we have some error. The error is that when we're trying to return something in React, it should basically be enclosed in one parent component. As you guys can see, it's not enclosed in one parent component. This is one div, and this is another set of code, which actually returns another set of divs. This is not enclosed in a one parent component. So let me cut all of this. Let me create a new div and put that in there. So as you guys can see, that error is gone. We need to put all of the content that we want to return in React in one enclosed like parent component. So now the error is that the variables are on there. So let's go ahead and copy that from this. That's going to be tasks and all of the function. So let me go ahead and copy all of the function, everything, and paste it over here. It's going to handle all of the things related to tasks. That's here. So as you guys can see, the use state is there regarding tasks, handle add tasks is there, handle update, use effect, all of the mapping stuff, which is segregated into a new component called tasks. So it's specifically for tasks. Let me save that. As you can see, we only see the heading, so we want to be able to render that component. So here I'm only defining a function, but as you can see over here, I should be able to export it as well. It should say export default and then the component name. So at the end, I say export default, and the name of a component is tasks. So it's basically a function. There are multiple ways you can do this. You can say const tasks and then create it as an arrow function. You can make it a named function. There's multiple ways you can do it, but just for now, just to make it standard, we'll do function tasks and then export default tasks. I'm going to be importing that, and I'll say import object. I import tasks. As I type it out, it will give me an autocomplete. So I'll click on that tasks. And as we saw in the React documentation, we can go ahead on that over here. This is how we render the component. So we just put the name of the component and then close the code. I'll say tasks and then I close it. We see, okay, as you guys can see, okay, as you guys can see, the exact same code we have it. Let's see if it works. Go to school, add task, which get the alert. If we update it, yes, all of this works. But if we go to the tasks again, we are using like this is kind of like a common component, right? We are mapping out the tasks and then we are returning it. So it's basically something common that we would also sometimes use in other pages. So we can create a specific component for this and then pass each text to that component as something called props and then use that in that component. Let's see how we can do that. So I'll create a new file component called task. Previously it was tasks, it's task now. So the task.jsx, it's going to be the same thing. I'll go over here. We want to import React from React, and then the function name is going to be task, and then what do we want to return? We want to be able to return what we map out and return. So I'll cut this, paste it over here, so we don't have that error, the enclosing error, because it's only just one component. It will take this as the parent component. So as you guys can see, right now we don't have access to this each task variable, as well as we don't have access to this handle update task. We also don't have access to the index. So how do we get access to it? So it's through something called props. So before that, so how that would work is, let's say let's just say I have not exported it, I have not imported it, nothing is yet done. But let's say I'm creating a component called task, which I've already done. The way I would pass the props is just as I would, pass any like on click handler to any function, like over here, as you guys can see, value or on change. So these are props for the input element. So I'm passing a prop that I want to pass to this specific component. The prop is going to be each task equals each task, which is over here. As we're mapping it out, we have access to each task. I'm also going to be passing in the index because I have access to it, and I'm also using the index. So I'll pass in the index. I'm also using this handle update task function. So I'll pass that as well. So once I do all of these three, I'll be able to access all these three variables and functions over here. So how do I accept it? So once I pass it, this is how I get the props. So as I pass all these three variables to the task function, this is how I get it here. So that it will be an object, and in that object there will be a property called each task, and that will be an array, and that will be an object with the none property and the task name property. And then I'll have a handle update task function. It will be a function, and then I will get the index. It's going to be a number. So as it's an object, we don't always want to say, let's say props, and let's say props dot each task and props dot index. Rather than saying that, we can destructure it. Let's say I put the curly brackets, and then inside this I could just put in the name of the variables that I want to extract. So it's each task and update task and the index, because we're actually passing it in the previous set of previous function when we are looping over it. So I'll import this right now. I'll say import task. Okay, I've not exported it yet. I'll say export default task. Save it. I'll import task, and I've imported that, and I'm mapping it out, and I'm sending in the variables over here. Okay, these are called props. As I've already have access to the props over here, I'm passing it to the task component, and I'm destructuring it and getting access to it, and then I'm using it in this component. So as you guys can see, the code has got much cleaner, and it's much more easier to handle and use the code, like change it, maintain the code. It's very easy right now. So if you see in the app component, we only have a tasks component. If I go inside of the tasks component, we have the necessary logic for it. And then if we're using any common component like this task component, we're using a specific component for that, and that has its own code. So it's very easier for the code maintenance. So this is what we did in this video, just to make sure that you guys know how we can segregate each component, each set of code into components. And then next video will be, it will be very easier for us to maintain and add more stuff for specific things. And that's about for this video, guys. Hope you guys found this helpful, and let's get on with the next video. Okay, right now you have the knowledge of the fundamentals of React, how it works, basic hooks, how you can map out and use components, all of those things. So congratulations, you guys know the basics of React. So right now let's move to the second part, which is APIs, Redux, and local storage. First of all, let's get started with APIs. First of all, what is APIs? The basic and the easiest understanding of visualization of API is basically you can think of the API as a waiter, the middleman. Let's say you, the customer, is requesting for something, requesting for a food. The waiter comes to you, takes the request, and goes to the kitchen, which is the server. You can think of it as a server or the database which has the list of data, takes the data, and then comes back and serves it to you. It's the same thing in the application as well. You click on a button, at that point you request for something, the API goes to the server which has a database of so many lists or something, some form of data, takes that data, and the API in the form of a waiter comes to you and gives it back to you in the application. The full form API is basically abbreviation. API is called, the full form is application program interface. There are multiple ways you can do APIs in React and in JavaScript. Mainly three ways. XML HTTP request is one of the oldest methods. It's mostly a low level way of doing it. It involves like a lot of steps in order to do that specific task. It's XML, and there's also fetch API, and there's also Axios. Axios is by far the most like easiest way of implementing the same functionality that other two libraries would provide, but it's also very easy. Even though we are using it for a smaller implementation or for a bigger implementation, it's very easy using Axios. So we'll be using Axios. As you can see from an example implementation, they're importing Axios, importing the package, same as they would import React. We would go into how packages work exactly. So these are the stuff we learned as well. They're using useState to store the list of posts. They're using useEffect to run the Axios call, basically calling the API to get the data from the server, and then set using that response. They're setting it to the list, to the array, setting the data to the array, and then dot catch basically means if there's any error, then console.log, and here they're mapping out and rendering it. So basically, whatever you learned right now, so the API needs to, as shown in this diagram, in this image, it should take the data from some kind of server, which should have a database of a lot of data. Where would we get that? So there's this thing called JSON placeholder, which basically gives you fake data used through an API. So this is basically not for production apps, but just to learn and prototype and testing. As you can see, it's very easy. This is the API, it's JSON placeholder.typeeco.com. It's basically like an URL. It acts as an API going to a database and fetching the data and coming back and providing it to us. So if you say the API URL slash to-dos, if you say run, and that will give you a JSON response with the specific data that you requested. And there are multiple data sources you can request. There's photo posts, comments, album, photos, to-dos, users. We already did to-dos, so let's go and explore users slash users. If we use this API request, if we do this API request, as you can see, we get a list of user information. So it's an array. So it's an array of 10 items. As you can see, it's an object, and the object has an ID, the name, email address, all of these things. So this is the API that we'll be using to get data and then show it in our React. So we'll learn how we can use Axios and do API handling. So let's get started. Let me go to the code, and I'll take a take a new look at a new create a new file. So I'll go to app.js. Let's do all of the stuff in app.js, and then let's segregate it into components. That'll make it much more easier. Or let's just start creating components right away. So as we're going to be using users, let's get a new component called users inside a component, and that's going to be JSX. What you can do is go to task, and you can copy it and copy this, copy the export. You can do that, but then there's a plugin in Visual Studio Code called let me check, um, ES7 plus React Redux React Native snippets. So it's used by over 11 million people. It basically gives you snippets for all the boilerplate code. So I'll say RAFC. That will basically give me the boilerplate code for this. I could also say RFC, which will give me the boilerplate code for this. So I'm going to be using that. You guys can download that extension. It's called ES7 Plus, and it's by DSZ Nudge there. You can download that. It's got over 11 million users. So I'll say RAFC, but it's the same thing. This has to just simply be a function, whether it's an arrow function or a named function. It just has to be a function. So we'll get used to this specific syntax. It's very easy. Export, it's basically a function, it's an arrow function, and then we export that function, and that's going to return name users. So this is where we're going to be doing all the code for users. So let's see how we can implement Axios. First of all, let's install Axios. Let me open up my terminal, the new version of the terminal. I'll say npm. So I hope you guys have already installed Node.js through the first video. If you have installed Node.js, you'll have access to npm. So you can say npm install Axios, which will basically install the Axios package. Once this is done, if you guys saw the first video, you guys would have seen a detailed explanation about node modules and package.json. In that, you can see under dependencies, right now we have Axios. So this is basically a library that our project is dependent on, and whether we host it on the web or anything, we need to make sure that Axios library is there. So right now, as you can see under dependency, we have Axios, meaning we could start using Axios for our project. Let me go into users, and I'll import Axios. Import Axios from Axios. Right now we have access to Axios, and we can start using it. As shown in this implementation, let's go ahead and click on users and get the API link for users. So as you guys can see, let me try to zoom in. Yeah, JSON placeholder.typecode.com. redux.com/users. So that is the URL of the API. The way we just need to start is, let's do a use effect, because we want to run this every time the user refreshes the website, only once every time the user refreshes the website. So it's going to be use effect with the arrow function and an empty dependency array, which is going to mean that every time only when the website is being refreshed. So let's say const response, or let's basically have this, yeah, let's just have this use effect because we want to call some other extra functions. Let's create a new function to get the list of users from the API. Let's say, let's name that get users. That's going to be an arrow function, as we did for all of the tasks, everything. This is going to be an arrow function just like that. Got that. And basically Axios is asynchronous. Basically what that means is, whenever you make the request, as shown in this diagram, whenever you make the request, waiter needs to take the request from you, go back to the server, take the data, and then come back, which basically takes time. So it's basically asynchronous. You need to wait for that to happen. So else this is going to be an asynchronous function. If you're already used to JavaScript, you would know this, but I'm just trying to get this out if people might have forgotten or don't have much knowledge in JavaScript. So this is going to be an asynchronous function, and I'll create a new variable. So it's going to be response, and I'm going to await the response. I'm going to say axios.get. So what is .get? It's basically means that through API you can make different types of calls. One is get, it's post, there's put, there's delete, there's multiple versions. Basically what this means is we are sending a .get request. So we are putting a request in to get some information. So in that point we use .get. But let's say we want to send some information, we want to create something. This is just to get, but let's say we want to create a user, create some data, create a table, something like that. At that point we use axios.post. Let's say we want to delete a user or delete a table, we say axios.delete. Let's say we want to update it, it's called axios.put. So multiple functions or multiple calls you can do through Axios for multiple different functions that you want to do. But we are going to be using axios.get right now. Once you do axios.get, it's a function, and then as you can see, you need to pass in the URL. So I think we did copy the URL. I'll copy it again and I'll put it over here. So as we are waiting it, the next part of the code wouldn't run until we do it, until we get the response from the await. But there's also another way you can do without doing the await. You can cut that, and then we can say dot then. Basically what this means is that it would only run, let me break this down into next line. The dot then would only run if the axios.get passes. So once this is done, then run this. So inside dot then we will get the data that is being returned by this API. Whatever these API returns, we will get it into this arrow function. We'll create a new function for that, and then for right now, let's just console.log the data. And we also have another way. Let's say sometimes the API might crash or API might not come through from the server to us. There might be some errors, but then we also want to make sure it shows in the user interface. So we want to catch that error. We can say dot catch, and inside that we get the error itself. Inside the arrow function arguments, we get the error, and then we open the function, and we'll say console.log. We'll console.log the error. Get users, but then we are not running the get users yet. When do we want to run the get users? We don't want to run it every second or every time. We only want to run it every time the user comes to the website, basically every time the user refreshes the website. So I'll run the use effect, run the get users function inside of the use effects. So let's go to our website. Let me right click inspect. We'll open up the console. Let me try to refresh. Okay. Okay, we don't see anything. The reason is we have not yet rendered this component yet. So let's go to app.js and right under tasks, we should import it. Let's import users, and I'll render users component. So you guys can see that this both of these imports are totally different, right? So this is not like a destructuring import, but this imports it like an object, because this is an arrow function, and tasks is a named function because we are exporting it as a default. So as we are doing it two in different ways, the import is also going to be different. But we'll go ahead and only use uh, arrow functional components from right now. So that will be very easy for us. It's going to be very straightforward. But you guys can use whatever you prefer. You guys can use named functions if that's very easy for you through JavaScript or something. So I have rendered the users component. Let me go to the console. Let me refresh. Click on OK. Okay. As you guys can see in the console, let me try to zoom in the console. Okay, refresh. As you guys can see in the console, we have a console.log from users.jsx, and if I go to the data, you can see there are 10 objects with users information. So you can see there's address, there's company name, there's ID1, there's Leon Graham, and there's 10 more details about users. So this we don't have it from any of our database, but we are using API which is being a middleman and getting the data from the database for us based on our request. We are not hard coding it. Based on our request, the API is going to the database and taking the data. So this will be really useful when we are working on the next couple of applications as well, as we will be using the OpenAI API, and we'll also be using vector databases, which is going to be a little introduction into databases and how you could use that, because it will be really helpful for you in order to add it to a portfolio, increase your knowledge, all those things. So that is that. As you guys can see in the data part, we get the list of users. So right now you guys know how Axios work, how API handling work. Let's just go over how what is currently happening. Just to recap, right now we are using Axios, and we are using Axios.get method. As we already told, there's get, there is post, there is put, and there's delete. Basically each of these methods have different functionalities. Get is to get information, post is to create something, put is to update, delete is to obviously delete it. Right now, as we just want to get use information, we'll say axios.get. We'll pass in the name of the API, the URL of the API, and then we'll say once this is done, then function, and then we open that up as an arrow function. Then we get the data that we are getting from the API. We console.log that. We also catch if there's any error in this axios.get for function. When the API is going back to the server and getting the data, if there's any error, then we catch it, then we console to log it. Then we run a useEffect hook, which basically runs the get users function every time the user reloads the website. So this doesn't happen every second, or it doesn't overload the website. It simply happens only when the user refreshes the website. Also, another thing that I want you guys to do is in try to store this data in useState. Yeah, store this data, and then map map the users, and list the users in the UI. Basically, whatever, it's the same thing that we did in the task section. We stored the list of tasks, and then we mapped them out and listed the tasks. So I want you guys to do that. Do the same thing for users. Try it out. I'll also include the answer in the description down below in a link, but try to do it yourself. It's going to be the same thing. Even if you guys can refer to the previous components and do it, that will be really helpful. It'll give you some idea on how it works and be helpful for the couple of projects and other things that we do and you learn. So right now you guys have a very good idea of how API works, and the next part is going to be Redux. So a little short introduction on Redux is basically Redux and context. So what this is basically, let's say in our code we have, let's say, users information is stored in the users component, right? And the tasks information is stored in the tasks component. Let's say I want to get access to the user information inside of the tasks component. I cannot do it, or there might be a couple of ways to do it, but it's not efficient. One way to do it is, let's say in the users, I'm let's say in the users component, I'm rendering the tasks component as well. And here I can pass the users information as a prop. I can say users equals users, the user that I'm maybe storing in the use state. And I can keep on passing props and props and props every time I want to pass data to the next components. And this is called prop drilling, and this is not the most efficient way to pass on information to other components, because as the project gets much more complicated, it becomes really hard to manage all the data at once, because there'll be a lot of moving parts, moving data. So this is where Redux and context come in. You can store all of the main information in one central place, and you can access that data throughout all of the components rather than passing it to each component through like a prop tree. A good example of visualization of this example would be this. Let's say this is our task component and this is our users component. We don't want to have like a user component and then task component and then have more components inside this, where we pass that information over here and we pass this information to this and this passes information to this, and then we don't want to like keep going down this thing like prop drilling. We don't want to be doing this because it becomes much more inefficient. As we create more components, more complex stuff, it becomes very inefficient. So that's where Redux and context comes in. That's what we'll be doing in the next video. And try to do the task, guys, where you need to store the users information in a state and then list out, map the users, and list each user in the UI. Try to add some design as well. uh, that's the task, guys. Hope you guys found this helpful. Do also read this blog that I have put in the description. Try to just go over it and read, and try to, if you want, you can implement the other methods of uh, API calling as well, which is XML request and fetch API. But I would highly recommend you use Axios and just get on with the task. So that's it, guys. Next video, let's go over Redux and context. I'm glad to see you at the end of this course, and I really hope you find it really useful. If you do find this useful until now, which you might have learned about React, basics of React, learning how components work, learning how state work, learning how to build basic to-do applications, you'll really love the entire course, where we go more into depth of how Redux work, hooks work, and also building an entire AI resume generator app using OpenAI, which is really trending and hype. And if you guys do learn it, you have a bunch of opportunities, job space as well as freelance opportunity. You guys can get this course at a 76% off discount, which I'll leave in the description down below just for you guys. And I really hope you find this useful. I've made this course straight to the point and without too many hours of content, straight to the point, and helping you get maximum understanding of how React works as well as how basic AI projects do work. I really hope you guys find this helpful. I built it for you guys, and thank you for all of you guys' support. And be sure to subscribe and also like the video. And I hope you'll find the entire course useful. I'll leave the link to it down below, and looking forward to seeing it. Thank you guys.